Good morning, everyone. First off today, we will hear from the City Solicitor, Andre Davis, about the suit being filed today by the City of Baltimore.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. I'm joined by a host of supporters and advocates and lawyers and human service providers to announce that this morning, Baltimore City became the first litigant to file a legal challenge to the Trump administration's further attempt to close the borders to those deserving of American residency and potential citizenship. I'm sure most people know that Baltimore City has not chosen to sit by idly as this administration has behaved in several spheres, lawlessly and without regard to settled legal norms, political norms, and frankly, moral norms. And so once again, together with our partners from Democracy Forward, with whom we have joined previously to assert legal challenges to lawless action by this administration, and with the support of the Mayor's Human Services Office and Immigrant Affairs Office, from whom you'll hear in a moment, we have filed this morning in the United States District Court for the District of Maryland a 5-count complaint challenging the legality of the Trump administration's attempt to modify the public charge definition that will have the effect, if it's allowed to remain in effect once it takes effect, will have the effect of prompting and incentivizing the abandonment of critical public support to our immigrant community. Baltimore City is a welcoming city. It believes that whatever we can do to ensure a high quality of life for its residents, we can ensure fairness and procedural fairness in all aspects of governmental behavior. We're going to take the steps to make sure that happens within the constraints of the law. And so this change to federal standards will, we are certain, result in fewer children having access to free lunches, with consequences to the nutrition and health of children. Will have adverse consequences to families as they attempt to access a range of publicly available benefits to which they are unquestionably entitled. In other words, the incentive here will be to abandon rights in the hope that family and affiliated persons overseas will not be harmed by this change. The lawsuit contends in great detail that the Trump administration has done everything it could to make life miserable for immigrants and potential immigrants. And in doing so, they have cut corners, legal corners, practical corners, in order to achieve their nefarious purposes. Well, Baltimore City is not going to stand still for this. We believe that we have a solid case. We are confident that the judge to whom we bring our claims will look very carefully at the case and examine very carefully the shortcuts that have been taken by the administration and restore the equanimity that existed before 2016 in this aspect of the country's immigration laws. I'm going to invite Catalina, head of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, to address some of the specifics of what we're trying to achieve by this lawsuit.
Thank you, City Solicitor. I want to take this opportunity to thank you and Democracy Forward for standing up with immigrants. President Trump has made his disdain for immigrants well known, but his administration now has taken it one step further by secretly implementing a policy intended to deter immigrants and their U.S. citizen family members from accessing the basic services that they need to thrive. But Baltimore is stronger than the Trump administration's hostility towards immigrants. And our vibrant immigrant community is a testament to that strength. For centuries, Baltimore has been a home to a rich immigrant community, and at its peak was the second most active port of entry next to our northern neighbor, New York City. Our geographic location made Baltimore a gateway for new Americans. We have inherited historic legacy of being a melting pot of new cultures and nationalities, laying a solid foundation for growth and prosperity among our diverse immigrant communities. Today, Baltimore continues to be a place of hope and prosperity for the thousands of immigrants that arrive in our city each year. Indeed, more than half of Baltimore's 48,000 foreign-born have arrived in the last 8 years. And as a welcoming city, Baltimore has worked hard to expand and develop new strategies to welcome and integrate our newcomers. It is important that all of our residents, and in particularly those who are foreign-born, know that Baltimore would not ask about or consider your immigration status when accessing our health clinics, prenatal care, food assistance, housing aid, or other city benefits. The Trump administration can try to stop Baltimore from welcoming its immigrant residents, but we will continue to do everything we can to ensure that immigrants are welcome and integrated in our city. And the reason for that is because immigrants are more than a subsector within our city. They make up our businesses, our schools, our communities. They are a part of Baltimore, and their value should not be understated. They're entrepreneurs, homeowners, small business owners, employers, taxpayers, whose contributions are helping grow our economy and our city. We are proud to support this legal challenge against President Trump because we know the immense value that immigrants bring to our city. Our immigrant population has a strong entrepreneurial spirit. In fact, 9% of businesses are immigrant-owned in our city, employing close to 7,000 residents. In addition, 9% of spending power in the city is controlled by an immigrant household, which equates to $964 million in local spending power. Our foreign-born population has a 70% labor force participation rate, and 37% have a college degree or higher. Immigration plays a very positive role in our city and economy. And as such, we will continue to take necessary steps to support new Americans in Baltimore because we know that immigrants are essential to the city's growth, its economy, and its rich culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. This lawsuit is really of a piece with the approach that Baltimore City has taken in a number of areas to fight back against attempts to make life unbearable for our immigrant residents. In particular, I'll mention the consent decree, federal court consent decree relating to police reform contains within it specific provisions with regard to police training for immigrant and in its dealings, the police department's dealings with immigrant communities within Baltimore. And we're pleased that that work continues, and we expect to see positive results from that work. Similarly, we are redoubling our efforts currently with regard to language access services for our immigrant communities here in Baltimore. And so in these and other ways, we intend to do everything we can as a city to make sure that the health and safety of our people are secured, and to the extent maximum extent allowed by law, to see that collateral benefits, including health care, nutrition, and other services are provided to the immigrants who are not parties to this lawsuit, but who clearly will be the beneficiaries together with the city when we proceed and show the legitimacy of our claims. I want to offer an opportunity to our wonderful partner from Democracy Forward to address very briefly some of the legal issues that we anticipate will be presented in the lawsuit. John?
Sure. Thank you, Solicitor. My name is John Lewis. I'm a counsel at Democracy Forward. I'm joined with my colleague, Corianne Jones, and several members of our policy and press team. Let me just start by saying how grateful we are to the city for their leadership on this issue, and we're thrilled to be bringing this case with them. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the legal claims.
How many other cities are jumping on board with Democracy Forward's efforts?
Baltimore is the only plaintiff in the case, but we expect that other cities will be supportive of our efforts as well.
Could you just detail me, because you get this immediate reaction, you're illegal anyway, I mean, so can you just go through the legality of all of this in terms of the access to public benefits by people who are immigrants, et cetera, just to give us the step-by-step?
Sure. I think it's important to emphasize what kind of benefits we're talking about. We're talking about non-cash supplementary benefits, things like health clinics, things like school lunches, things like job training. These aren't benefits that an immigrant or their family is going to rely on exclusively. These are benefits that are supposed to give families a little extra help when they need them. And importantly, these are all benefits that immigrants are eligible to receive under the law, under federal law, under state law, and under Baltimore's local laws. These are programs that Baltimore provides to all of its residents without regard to their immigration status. So immigrants have done nothing wrong by taking these benefits, but what the Trump administration now wants to do is impose additional immigration consequences for taking these benefits. And we contend that that's unlawful under numerous federal laws in the Constitution.
How do they do that, though? I mean, do they deny someone a visa to come in if they're going to? I don't understand how it works exactly.
That's right. The way that it works is the change that we discuss in the lawsuit is to the State Department's Foreign Affairs Manual. The Foreign Affairs Manual directs how officers at consulates make visa decisions for applicants who are applying at the consulate. So what happens under the expanded provision is the consular officer is allowed to consider a much wider range of benefits when making that determination, is allowed to look at their receipt of non-cash benefits and determining whether they're likely to be a public charge who's inadmissible from the country.
It seems like you're saying, I mean, the wording says consider whether that would be included in their visa application and their entry to the country. That would sort of be making sure they're not a public charge. But consider seems like a very liberal word to use in that it's not going to be the only factor, but it's factored into a whole bunch of other decisions. I'm a little bit confused. How are you able to have this lawsuit if that sort of terminology seems very loose?
It's a great question. I would make 2 points here. The first is the language of the Foreign Affairs Manual. While considered as fairly open-ended, the Foreign Affairs Manual is the rulebook for consular officers. If there's a change to what they're supposed to consider, we can assume that consular officers are going to follow the instructions that they're given, and those instructions require them to consider a much wider range of benefits. But I would couple that with the practice that we're already seeing at consulates across the globe. In particular, the consulate at Ciudad Juarez, we've heard reports from immigration practitioners that immigrants are increasingly being denied visas in response to this change. So we think it is a pretty momentous change in how visa applications are considered.
But we're not referring, we're also referring to people who are in the country receiving non-cash benefits like food stamps. I'm thinking their children are U.S. born citizens, but they are awaiting a visa or maybe here undocumented. They will be sort of, if their visa process comes around, they will be sort of charged with, okay, well, were you receiving non-cash benefits? Were your children receiving non-cash benefits? Mm-hmm. So you're saying that that sort of stuff will play into their status of whether they stay here or not?
That's exactly right, in a couple of different ways. So if you're in the United States right now on a non-immigrant visa and you want an immigrant visa, you generally have to leave the country to go apply at a consulate. And so when you apply for that visa, the new changes would affect you. But it also potentially affects the family members of that person and the sponsor of that person, or a sponsor that's trying to bring over family members from abroad. The use of non-cash public benefits by all of these individuals can now be considered under the changes the Trump administration has made.
And why doesn't the Trump administration have the legal right to make this change?
There are a number of statutes and constitutional provisions that limit the administration's authority here. One that we cite repeatedly in the complaint is the Administrative Procedure Act. That imposes both substantive and procedural requirements on what the administration can do. Most importantly, the administration can't do things that are arbitrary and capricious, that don't have a sufficient rationale or a sufficient explanation for the change the administration has made. And we contend that the administration hasn't tried to provide any explanation here, hasn't tried to provide any explanation for why it's reversed decades-old understanding of the public charge doctrine. The administration was also required to comport with certain procedural requirements, provide the public with notice and an opportunity for comment, as they've done with analogous changes at the Department of Homeland Security. So that procedural requirement, too, wasn't met. And then the final thing that limits the administration here is the Constitution, specifically the equal protection requirement of the Fifth Amendment. And here, as we argue in the complaint and set out in detail, the administration's changes are motivated by hostility and animus towards immigrant communities. The president has made that clear in his own statements and from other reporting from what's been happening within the administration. So while you're certainly right, the administration has some discretion and authority here, that authority comes with important limits.
Can you quantify how many current residents this would affect versus potential future immigrants to the city?
So that's a difficult question to answer, in part because immigrants don't generally report why they've decided to stop taking public benefits. So we have a number of anecdotes in the complaint that explain how many immigrants are, out of fear of the FAM change, being deterred from using public benefits. But in general, the population that this affects is immigrants who are seeking to come here and their family members and sponsors who are already in the United States, or as I mentioned before, immigrants who have to leave the United States to apply for a visa and then come back.
Was this definition change made in January?
It was made in January, that's right.
And when would it go into effect?
It's already in effect right now. Yep.
Okay.
And so why file the lawsuit now? This went into effect in January, so why file the lawsuit now?
That's right. So over the last few months, we've heard increased reporting about the effect it's having at consulates. We've heard stories about how it's being used to deny individuals at Ciudad Juarez, as I mentioned before. It's being used to deny disabled individuals, and it's clear that the administration plans to enforce the provision aggressively. So when we saw that, we decided that the time was right to try to put an end to what the administration was doing.
And you cite in the press release, at least the Head Start program, and you said you can't be sure why people have stopped taking public benefits, but has there been any other measurable impacts on the use of public benefits?
Well, we can be sure that some immigrants have stopped taking benefits out of fear of this change. My point before was just that it's difficult to quantify the complete population. But in addition to the Head Start statistic that is mentioned in the complaint, we've heard reports from other providers in the Baltimore area. There are public reports about this, of how immigrants have decided to stop using WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children program, stop using SNAP food stamps, have really stopped using all sorts of public benefits in response to this change.
And talk about the federal guidance, how it's recognized by the federal government. That immigrants will be deterred and their families.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And so one point that we make in the complaint is that the federal government has already recognized that these sorts of changes threaten to deter immigrants from accepting public benefits. In the proposed rule that the administration put out from the Department of Homeland Security, they describe at length how immigrants will decide to stop taking public benefits in response. And the result is really the same here as it is there. The Foreign Affairs Manual, by changing the rules and imposing new immigration consequences on taking public benefits, will obviously give immigrants another thing to think about before they decide to take those benefits.
The free school lunches, though, for example, I mean, that's something that the school system doesn't ask parents whether they're immigrants or not. They simply give benefits, give those free school lunches to all students. Are you saying that the federal government, as far as budgets go, Title IX sort of money coming in for those free school lunches would be sort of cut or changed around because of this policy?
It's important to emphasize that we're not talking about any money being cut from the city. The question is simply whether immigrants feel willing to take those programs when they're being provided. And the answer is that even if the city's programs don't track an individual's immigration status, when you apply for a visa, you have to give truthful answers. If they ask you about what public benefits you've taken, or if they find from other records that you've taken these benefits, you could potentially be worried about the immigration consequences there. So while the city, in many of its programs, does not track immigration status, even when they don't, there's still a concern that the administration may seek to impose consequences for that.
So what do you hope to accomplish with this lawsuit overall?
Sure. So the relief we seek in the complaint is first and foremost a declaration that what the administration is doing right now is illegal, but then also an injunction that would require the administration to revert to the previous version of the Foreign Affairs Manual, to the manual as it existed in December 2017, and adjudicate visa applications by those standards and not the standards that the administration put into place without any notice, comment, or explanation.
This might be a better question for Mr. Davis, but why is this such a priority for Baltimore in
given the swath of other issues that the city is facing?
We have a lot of priorities. We care about all of our citizens and our residents, and this is an opportunity to fight back against what we perceive to be discriminatory, invidious, frankly hateful actions by the national government. We've done it before. You'll recall that the national government tried to snatch away a teen pregnancy program. You'll recall that we brought a lawsuit together with Democracy Forward to challenge the national government's attempts to overrule by other means the Affordable Care Act. Even though, by the way, fortunately here in Maryland, the negative impacts from the national government's assaults on the Affordable Care Act will hopefully be fairly minimal. So Baltimore has a lot of priorities. We care about the people who live here. We want to be known as we are, as a welcoming place, a place that pays attention to equality and inclusion. And so it's a very high priority for the city. And as I said before, it's consistent in particular with this administration's appropriate concern for the lives of the immigrants who contribute to the vibrancy of the city and the well-being of the city. So we don't regard this as a lesser concern in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. Davis, why shouldn't this be seen as a Democratic mayor trying to score political points against the Republican president?
I can't deny that Mayor Pugh is a Democrat, and I can't deny that the President of the United States is a Republican, although there's some question about that, frankly, given his behavior. But it shouldn't be seen that way because we have the integrity to bring lawsuits on behalf of the city and its residents when the law and the facts of the matter compel us to do so. It has nothing to do with the particular party of any particular elected official.
I mean, this will get, potentially the mayor might get national attention by bringing this lawsuit against the president. I mean, couldn't that be thought of as a factor as to why this lawsuit's being brought forward?
I don't think so. The mayor gets plenty of national attention. The mayor is the co-chair, for example, of the National Mayors Association on the whole census question. The mayor has been out front on the need to make sure that everyone in Baltimore City is counted. And as I'm sure you're aware, there are efforts, including ongoing lawsuits against the Commerce Department, the Secretary of Commerce, with regard to that citizenship question. The mayor is fully supportive of all those efforts to make sure that persons in this country and persons in this city in particular are counted in the census. Because as you know, it means a lot. It means a lot in terms of the funds that come to the city to support our programs. So this is not some effort by Mayor Pugh to elevate her stature nationally. She feels very deeply about the people in this city. And this lawsuit, as I say, is of a piece, a manifestation of that continuing concern.
I have a question for John. At the end here, it talks about a leaked draft of an executive order for a newly proposed rule. I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about what that is.
So what we try to do in that section of the complaint is lay out how this has been a priority for the administration from day one. Since the very first weeks the administration came into office, they've tried to change the rules for public charge across the board. There was the leaked draft executive order, there's the change to the Foreign Affairs Manual that our complaint challenges, and then of course there's the proposed rule put out by the Department of Homeland Security. And in all of these different policy changes, the administration's objective has been clear. It's been to chill immigrants from taking public benefits and make immigrants who have taken public benefits afraid for their status in the United States. And despite the slight legal differences between each of those different policy changes, that sort of animating motive has lurked behind everything the administration has done.
And would you spell your last name, please?
Lewis, Lewis.
And it's John?
Yes, John, John.
Excuse me, I'm still a little fuzzy here. If I'm an immigrant already in the U.S. and I'm getting some benefits, how does it really actually threaten me? And
So-
we're already here.
Sure. So it could affect you in a couple of different ways. If you're here on a non-immigrant visa, if you're here on like a tourist or a student visa, and you seek to change your status to being on an employment visa or a family-based visa, you often have to leave the United States first and then apply for a visa at the consulate, in which case you would be affected by the Foreign Affairs Manual change. If you have no plans to do that and you're in the United States, perhaps you're even a citizen in the United States, and you want to sponsor another immigrant to come over, your use of public benefits can be considered in that inquiry as well. So there are a number of different ways that somebody who's already in the country might see an effect from this. And we've seen that immigrants who are already in the country, here lawfully, here with lawful permanent resident status or citizenship, have been afraid to take public benefits in response to this change.
Is there an example of someone being denied a visa because of this change to the public charge definition?
So we don't mention a specific case in the complaint. A lot of these cases are individual immigration cases, being heard at the consulates. But what we've heard from people who are, litigating these cases on behalf of immigrants is that there has been an increase in denials at particular consulates like Ciudad Juarez and among specific groups of immigrants.
So you do believe you've got tangible evidence of this change actually denying people access to visas?
Yes, that's correct.
And that will certainly be a big part of the discovery in this case. We would certainly, both through Public Information Act requests and otherwise, seek to gather data on what the consequences have been in the 10 months or so that this change has been in effect, and in what particular countries. This is all data that would be very, very helpful to our case.
And this suit has already been filed in federal court here in Baltimore?
Yes.
Yes. We'll
We'll be posting the complaint online at the Law Department website within the next hour or so, under cases of note. Visit it often. Thank you all very much.
Oh, Mr. Davis, actually, on another subject, could you talk to us about...
Do you want to wait until we
Yeah.
kind of clear the podium if you want?
Yeah, we're just here today on
Well, it would just
the
be,
lawsuit.
right, I understand. It would just be really helpful for us just to get an explanation from you about the legal aspect of the background investigation, why that can't be.
You know, I'm always trying to be helpful, but here today, we're only here on the immigrant.
But just like the
rights
city, we
bench.
can do various things at once.
Talking chew gum, yeah.
Thank you, Solicitor.
Thank you, James.
Now the mayor's asked me to highlight a few upcoming events in the city. So we have Jed Duvall here, who will be performing at the 25th Annual Night of 100 Elvises, which will be held this weekend, Friday and Saturday over at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, to tell us more about the event.
Thank you.
Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? I'd like to thank the mayor, first of all, and her office and staff for allowing us to speak here this morning. My name is Jed Duvall. I represent the Night of 100 Elvises, and I'm here this morning to tell you a little bit about this great Baltimore tradition. This Saturday will be the 25th year of the event, which for the past few years, has been held at the historic Lord Baltimore Hotel. Now, contrary to the name, the Night of 100 Elvises isn't 100, there aren't 100 guys running around looking like me or Elvis or whatever. The 100 Elvises, it refers to the 100 or so songs that Elvis Presley recorded, being played by a variety of musical acts. In the same way that Elvis Presley derived his sound from different sources, be it country, R&B, soul, gospel, our event hosts bluegrass bands, hard rock acts, dance troupes. Almost any type of entertainment is represented, with the common denominator being the music of Elvis Presley. And if seeing guys emulating Elvis is your thing, well, there's plenty of that too. Another interesting aspect of the show is the audience. You may see attendees dressed in their finest shark skin suits and bouffant hairdos. They may be dressed as aliens. They may be dressed as Roman gladiators. The bottom line is we're having a good time and listening to some great music. But We also represent another side of Elvis Presley, that of a man with almost mythical capacity for generosity. Elvis was famous for giving away cars, but he also donated to a number of worthy organizations. And in keeping with that spirit, the Night of 100 Elvises benefits various Baltimore organizations, either through direct donations or through giving away tickets to the event, which those organizations can then sell off, or they can give to volunteers or that sort of thing. That's something we're still doing this week, and anyone interested in that, please come see me after. In addition, the vendors and service providers, the food, the beer, all that, are represented by local, smaller local businesses, either directly from Baltimore or from the greater Maryland area. Now, we are very aware and proud that we are bringing people from around the state, around the country, and in some cases from around the world to Charm City. And we're always quick to point out the number of interesting locales and things for them to go and see. As I said, this Saturday marks our 25th year, and doors open at 4 p.m. with live music beginning at 4:45. Tickets are still available for the event, and practically any questions about the Night of 100 Elvises can be answered by visiting our website, www.night-of100elvises.com. However, I can attempt to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Did you say it benefits local organizations?
It does.
Could you describe like what type of organizations?
Well, it benefits, one of our biggest benefitors, is Johns Hopkins Children's Center. We also support the Believe in Tomorrow House, which is a house which accommodates the parents of children at Johns Hopkins who are awaiting treatment. Another organization is Project PLACE, P-L-A-S-E, which benefits the homeless of Baltimore. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I think Stacy has actually press releases in the back if anyone wants one of those.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, just a little bit of housekeeping here. I think someone told me that it is Ms. Bonessi's last day, so we just want to say thank you from the Department of Communications for your coverage of us here.
It's not social media right now, but WAMU-NC.
There are just a couple events coming up for here at City Hall that the mayor would like to just put out there for you guys. On Monday, December 3rd, City Council President Jack Young's menorah lighting will be here in City Hall at 11 a.m. On that same day, we will have the tree lighting and holiday open house. That's at 5:30 p.m. We have a great program lined up for the citizens of Baltimore. There will be performances by national gospel recording artist Marette Brown Clark, Baltimore's own The Voice semifinalist Devon Fleming, and national R&B recording artist Kiki Martin. There will also be pictures with Santa and the mayor for the children. Light refreshments available for purchase from Zeke's Coffee. And also next month there will begin a new Rotunda concert series. The preliminary dates are 12/21. The artist is Jay Jin. On January 18th, there will be Ernesto J. Ponce and Spirit Parade. And on February 22nd, Grayson Moon. Doors will open at 11:45. You can come on your lunch break to City Hall for live music by local Baltimore-born and based musicians. Bring your own lunch or purchase one from the food trucks that are around City Hall. All of these events are free and open to the public, and we hope to see you here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick.